OGAccountability.com. Morning, everybody. This is David with OG Accountability. Back again with James Greene. James was here, about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago?
Yeah.
I don't know. Time's been traveling so much and going on, and we really, the last time he was here, we got on the discussion and the big topic of veteran health, veteran needs, all through the Vail Institute, what it is, the mission in this country of helping our veterans, pointing direction, getting the right resources in front of them. Today, we may kind of browse on that topic a bit, but now we're just going to kind of get into the OG factor, the old guy factor. I never asked you, what are you, 37, 38?
31.
31?
Yeah.
Well, you don't look 37 or 38, but you carry yourself very well. So
thank you.
At least you're a guy. You don't ever do that to a woman.
Sure.
But thank you so much for being here this morning. And we were kind of chatting back and forth, just a little by text, but earlier, just talking about the mental health of men. Mental health is a huge topic, not just within the veteran community. If you turn on the news, if you go to any, I almost said newspaper, but nobody reads newspapers.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Online. But
yeah. What's funny is, have you ever heard of 1440 News?
I haven't.
It is a completely non-biased, and I hope I'm saying it right, but the only way you get their information is they email it to you. So you actually have to go open the email and go and scroll through and read. And basically that's what it is. It's just a newspaper that they email out.
Okay.
And it feels really weird. Like there's no pictures, there's nothing to click on. It's a newspaper. There is no you click and get the story. You actually have to read it. And does anybody read anymore?
I try to, but it's tough. I mean, audiobooks are kind of taking over.
I kind of like it. So speaking of audiobooks, I got that guy from Austin, the actor, all right, Matthew McConaughey.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
He wrote a book called Green Lights, really good book. I made it about halfway through reading it, and then my friend's like, you do know he's got it on an audiobook, and I'm
Is
like,
it his voice too?
It's him doing it.
You got to listen to that.
And so I've been listening to it. It's pretty good. The only problem I have, and this is so off topic, I don't even know how the heck we got on this, is since he's an actor, sometimes you're like, is he playing a role or is this really him? Like when you hear him talking, I understand it's AI and it's not really him reading it, but sometimes you think like, was he just playing a character or is this real? Is he really being real? That's the only hard thing. Kind of like if you see Jim Carrey in a serious movie, any second you're waiting for him to do something stupid.
Yeah.
I was telling you just yesterday, was speaking with a friend of mine about the political climate, everything that's going on in the Middle East right now, and some of the things that they were dealing with men, their fellow veterans calling in, just kind of reliving some memories and some good and a lot bad. But I think, James, I think the biggest part of mental aspect, and feel free to chime in anytime. You can cut me off anytime you want. I think the hardest part about the mental side of things is we aren't in a society to where we are raised to be talkers. So when you sit there and you battle with things alone in your mind, that's just it. You think you're the only person that feels that way.
Well, I think this generation coming up, we're advocating for expressing emotion, understanding emotion far more than any other generation. The issue today is that the previous generations don't know how to communicate what they're feeling. Yeah. So there's no wisdom. You're taking an emotionally immature being as a young man, right, prepubescent or into his teenage years, what have you, and he's supposed to experience these emotions at full tilt, right, full tilt as far as hormones are concerned and his ability to express emotion. But he can't turn to his elders and say, what was that, right? What am I experiencing? Can you label that for me? How do I avoid that in the future? What triggered that? There's no conversation to be had.
No.
So they're all just kind of sitting in their own personal darkness, which is great in some respect, because in sitting in personal darkness, that's where you understand your individual truth, right?
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
really all that matters at the end of the day is what your individual truth is. But there still needs to be some sort of conversation between generations. And I think that's something that we've really struggled with working with veterans, is even veterans from previous wars. they're not really interested in understanding what's going on. They just want their PTSD symptoms to stop. And whether they do that through avoidance or they do that through substance use, most often than not, those are the two categories, right? At least for the previous generations. And then today's generation of warfighter is coming back, right? The 20-year war is over, and although it's looking like it's starting to kind of steamroll again, these guys that are coming back from OIF and OEF, they want to understand what's going on with their bodies, with their minds. Why are they so hypervigilant? How did these old timers from the Vietnam era overcome it? And unfortunately, I think a lot of those guys just never did overcome, those symptoms of PTSD. They just learned to live with it.
They're just living. They're coping. That's all. And in your experience, do you find it a much healthier path in dealing and having seen both sides from, like you said, the 20-year war, and then from past wars, that are guys and girls that will openly talk and express their feelings and express their anxieties? Are they, I hate to use the word healthier, but do you see more growth for those that have an open line of communication and are able to talk about things?
It's a great question. And I think what you're seeing today is us pushing towards this understanding of post-traumatic growth, but it's a very long process. So the answer would be not necessarily, right? Like, these guys they're still struggling the same, even though they're learning to articulate what happened. There are safe spaces, if you would, to be able to talk about maybe military sexual trauma or, combat trauma, but there's still room for growth. And I think you see that happening because the military isn't doing anything preemptively to kind of curtail these consequences of combat, right? I mean, even just having the conversation beforehand, preparing somebody mentally to take a life is one thing. Preparing somebody mentally to deal with the after effects of taking a life is something completely different. But the conversation could still be had in the training phase for these warfighters, where it's a less, I think it should be less ego-based and more pragmatic. That this is the situation you're going to run into. It's a lot like talking with the police force and knowing that the use of deadly force is only authorized when the deadly force triangle is met, right? When there's opportunity, there's capability and intent. So you have these kind of conversations and you start to rationalize kind of this emotional response to taking a life. And I just think we could be doing more on the front end for our warfighters in teaching them how to communicate what's going on, giving them downtime in between missions. And then I don't want to say talk therapy. It's not an end all. It's not an end all solution. Talk therapy, right? CBT. It's in fact, I would maintain that since cognitive behavioral therapy is the primary modality of the last 4 decades, that
it hadn't worked much, has it?
In a lot of ways, it's led to the suicide epidemic that we see today. But I think that's because we're using it as a corrective measure instead of a preventative measure. So maybe if we kind of make that shift in our mentality, and that we're going to start talking about these potential issues that are going to come up, we're going to prepare everybody mentally, it could be more effective on the back end.
I got to be careful how I say this, because I have a friend who's a clinical psychologist, and she's awesome. We didn't argue, because I don't argue. I'm not an arguer at all.
Prove me right, prove me wrong.
Yeah,
let's move on.
That's just it. Well, we kind of got into and me being who I am, I opened my mouth and I said, well, I really don't see therapy helping for a lot of people. I said it helps for the 15 minutes after. But then they get in their car and they leave and they get home, those same triggers are there, you really just put a Band-Aid on the problem. And then I really opened my mouth and I said, and it's real fitting that for $175 an hour, I'll help you out, but I need to see you at least 8 to 10 times.
Well, it's a lot like working out though, right? Like one sit-up, one set of push-ups isn't going to make you fit. Okay, you have to do it over and over and over again. Going to a trainer once a week isn't going to make you fit. The trainer is going to prepare you. They're going to educate you, but you still have to put in 4 or 5 days worth of work on your own. And therapy is very much.
It's not happening here, man.
You got to be disciplined, man.
But yeah, so And the reason I was, said that, of course, she got very defensive. She had every right to be, because it's just my opinion.
Sure.
I haven't done any. Yeah, exactly. I haven't done any studying. Well, that was kind of, well, who do you think you are? I was like, well, and this was my answer. And I said, I don't think I'm really anybody, but for the past, 23 years, I have worked with thousands and thousands of families, worked in a high school directly with kids, and was a youth pastor for 17 years, dealt with so many things firsthand. And here's what, we're talking about the mental health side. When you get into churches and things like that, we typically normally deal with the mental health side of things before any professional ever does.
Yeah.
People want to come and just bounce things. Hey, do you think this? Hey, do you think that? And the way I was raised, I can give my opinion, but a lot of times have to look at people and say, hey, look, I don't have training in this area. I can tell you what my thought process is, but you probably need to go seek out a professional.
Well, good on you for knowing your professional scope.
Absolutely.
A lot of people cross those boundaries.
The worst thing you can do in trying to get help, whether it's, even if it's just physically, I mean, this sounds stupid, but if I'm in dire needs of a doctor, I'm not going to go to a veterinarian. I mean, I will if last resorts, but go to the right places, go to the right channels.
Yeah.
But what do we do when the right channels aren't the correct channels? What do we do in the right channels? Like we were saying, we haven't seen a lot of success. Why is that still being pushed? And why have we not tried alternative medications? Mm-hmm. Why have we not had a gentleman here just a while back, and one of the things that he was really big on, and he dealt with a long line of addiction, but he got into nootropics and different things like that, and he's like, man, these have really helped me out tremendously from some of the things that he faces. I'm not going to get into all of his stuff. I almost said something else, but why? How come we haven't gone out and looked for alternative? Because this hasn't been working.
Well, you built the system the wrong way to begin with, right? I mean, what is it that they say? Something like a healed client is a lost customer, or something in those regards, right? Like that
was part of the pharmaceutical
total healing,
yeah,
right? And when you're dealing with kind of a socialistic healthcare perspective, like the VA, then it's far more economical to just let somebody suffer and die a premature death than to heal them as well, right? So when all the decisions in the healthcare system are based on the bottom line, right? Based on the profit and loss statement, you're not going to see ethics or ethical decisions coming out of that.
It's a business.
Exactly. It's not just a business. It's a government subsidized, privately funded business.
It can't
right?
fail.
Exactly. It's too big to fail, and nobody's going to really want to change it because it's churning money. Right.
Do you know Andrew Tate?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like him. I like him because I'm a lot like that. I have to work at being, I don't want to say kind, but I can be just very cut and dry.
Yeah.
But he was interviewing the guy that bought I think this was in 2012, but he just did an interview with Andrew Tate and a couple different people. And he was the guy that bought the AIDS medication that they have seen great success on. And he bought the medication, and a week after he bought it, he then turned it around and raised the price to $5,000 a dose.
Sure.
So they're asking him why. You know what his answer was? Because I had the money to buy it, and I can.
That's business.
That's business.
I mean, ethically speaking, he is a great businessman,
yeah.
Right? Like, congratulations. You've done your shareholders, your stockholders, your investors, you've done a good job by them. But what does that mean for the consumer?
Exactly.
Right?
And what about the cancer wards and different things like that? If anybody ever wants to see people that are mentally despaired and physically despaired, go get a dozen donuts, a dozen kolaches, and go down to the cancer ward about 8 o'clock on a Tuesday for everybody down there having their chemo, and ask for permit. Don't just show up. You got to go through the proper channels. Go in there and say, hey, I just want to donate, and go hand them donuts out to those people and watch every single one of them that is sitting there going through their treatment. And when you talk about the mental anguish, the mental despair, but also part of the pharmaceutical side of things, cancer's big business, huge business.
Yeah.
And, we get to a place that even there was a friend of mine. Her mom had a very, very rare cancer, and she did stem cells. You know, everybody was real big against stem cells. Well, for her, it worked. That was 7 years ago. They told her that the cancer would be back within 4 years because of the stem cell research was so new and everything they were doing. Well, now she's past that 4 to 5 year mark. The paranoia that she has in her life, that mental, and I'm not going to say illness because that's what they say. Like, well, they have mental illness. No, they are faced with a real situation that's a life or death situation. And when that is in front of you all day long, every single day, and then I'll use the word you're cured of it, or you have a time of healing, but you're told it's coming back. Every time she wakes up and if her elbow aches, she's like, oh my God, do I have a tumor in my elbow? If she coughs, oh my God, and we talk about that mental aspect of things. James, I truly believe this. I believe there's some things that we will never overcome and maybe we weren't meant to. Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe there's some traumatic things that's just it, that trauma, and I don't want to use the word trauma response, but that knee-jerk response will always be there. And, sometimes we want to fix it and say, well, I need that to go away. Well, that can't go away. That became part of your DNA. That's part of who you are.
Well, you're almost starting to sound like demasculinizing. How would you say that? I guess getting rid of the masculinity of the world, right? I mean, emasculating is the right word.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
emasculating society, and I kind of lost track of where I was going there. What were you saying?
I hit 40 and everything went out the window. Oh, just talking about that when we look at people, if we have not really ever dealt with or gone through the trauma they're going through, and we just look at it and we're like, man, just get over it. Well, you can't. You can't just snap out of it. And you said something the last time you were here, and man, it really weighed with me, and it is true. The things that, and we'll use the veteran life, what combat veterans have dealt with, and the trauma, and like you said, and it's so good. I understand there's people who've dealt with trauma, and you dealt with that 10 or 15 minutes in your life that was a traumatic situation. Mm-hmm. And then now we go to people that for 9 months at a time were in a complete and utter living hell. Mm-hmm. You really can't weigh those against each other.
No, you can't. You can't. But you can study one in order to better understand the other, right? I mean, you got to understand everybody needs to go through crucible moments in life. And we label these trauma now, and that's fine and dandy just so we can, for the sake of conversation, right? Okay, we'll group it all together and call it trauma. But it's a spectrum, right? What do the kids say? There's levels to this shit.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's if you want to understand what the 15 minutes, your hellish 15 minutes has done to you, the only way to understand that is to study the individuals who are truly dealing with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Their nervous system, their neurology, everything is backwards.
I think that may be, yeah. I know you got kids, so
it's all good.
When my phone goes off, man, I always check.
All good. So you're talking about if you want to understand what's going on with your body, right? Ask the truly traumatized. And that's what we've been doing. Like I said, 40, 50 years now, we've taken these shell-shocked veterans. That's all we knew about veterans. And we studied what post-traumatic stress really does to the nervous system, to the neurons into your brain, into your behavior, right? And so now we understand what the body does, right? This great book out there, The Body Keeps the Score. And I recommend anybody read it. I mean, it's a pretty simple read. It's a little thick, but especially if you've experienced anything that you would call traumatic, because it really does a great job in breaking down exactly what's going on with your body, why you have triggers, why you respond a certain way. And then once you understand physiologically what's going on with trauma, you can start to understand the emotionality behind it. Yeah. And then we start breaking into emotional intelligence. And when you start breaking into emotional intelligence, now we're really pushing the collective consciousness forward to this transcendent idea of less ego, more self-esteem, right? But it takes traumatic events.
And I think ego a lot of times will keep people from getting help or speaking out.
Absolutely.
Like, well, no, I've got it all. I'm all together. And I think we'll call it the Clint Eastwood complex.
Sure.
Growing up, I mean,
like
Clint
that.
Eastwood was like the manliest man on the face of the earth. And when you start facing the mortality of your life, I'm not being morbid, but we're here just for a little bit of time.
Well, facing your mortality is a requirement of the Stoics, philosophically speaking. So don't think it's too morbid. I mean, I believe it's necessary for someone to live an intentional life. Start at the end. What do you want your death to look like? Now let's start constructing what you're living, Liz.
I saw something, and growing up, there was a church we attended, and the pastor there was just the manliest man you've ever met in your life. He was a rancher. He ran cattle and horses. I mean, he was a Billy. Like, he
calloused hands and a tall hat.
Not a joke of a man. Love God, love people, but you come out to his ranch and you mess around, he probably knocked the crap out of you.
Yeah.
So he said something though, and it's on YouTube. He said, "I taught my boys how to live." And he was in the hospital and they were interviewing him because they knew he was going to die. He said, "I taught my boys how to live life." He said, "Now I'm teaching them how you're supposed to die." And when I heard him say that, so my father watched it because that was my dad's pastor. And that was the one thing when I saw him after he watched it, he said, "That's probably the best thing I've ever heard a man ever say when it came to his kids. I raised you how to live. Now I'm going to teach you how to die." And like you said, once you get into that thought process of this is going to happen whether I want it to or not, it will take a lot of fears out of your life. My problem is I got a really creative mind, so I sit there and I'm a scenario runner. I run through every scenario before I get into a situation, just to know if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens,
response.
Yeah, I've always been that way. But that was so beautiful, and after I heard that guy say that, that's probably one of the most beautiful things. So now that changed my whole approach with my daughter. I mean, we talk about, she's only 12. I'm very careful a 12-year-old can only understand 12-year-old things. But it's allowed me to start talking to her about planning, about life. Hey, baby, one day Daddy's not going to be here. And I hope that's a long ways down the road. But I lost one of my best friends. He's got a daughter my daughter's age, and she comes over and stays the night all the time. And I'll just sit there sometimes, and she'll come in and talk to me, and she's like, I just miss my dad so much. And when you realize it's like this, we don't ever talk about death. That's one of the things just in the humanity. We just don't. At least our culture doesn't. The American culture don't. In other countries, they start planning for their death well ahead of time. But we just don't talk about it. And then it hits everybody by surprise, and everybody's mortified, and car wrecks, things like that. Those are things that are uncontrollable. But why is it in the mental part of things, it's always the deathbed confessions. It's always the I'm sorry when it's too late. Like, get your mental thought process right. Get your thinking right. Get the crap fixed now. And it's why is it when we start dealing with the mortality of things and then suddenly, well, I shouldn't have done this, and we should talk more, and we should have been this way, and I shouldn't have been upset about this. Be purposeful. Start now. Don't wait. Start now.
Well, that's a difficult way to life, or with intention. To life with intention, it requires, like what we're talking about, right? Emotional intelligence. It requires virtues and values and integrity and self-reflection and all of this stuff that is really pretty difficult, not just to even get started, but to carry on. I mean, some of us have been living very reflective existences for years and years and years, and the work doesn't get any easier. The questions just get bigger. If anything, the work gets a little harder.
Yeah.
But it's also a necessity, I believe, if you're going to live a good life. And we get back to this individual truth aspect of things, right? And it's, if you want to call yourself a Christian and that's what your belief system is, by all means. But live by it, right? Live by those virtues. Have a disciplined approach to that, to that way of living. And I'm cool with it. Now, if you just want to sit back and let life pass you by and be a kind of backseat driver, this is where you and I are going to run into some philosophical issues, right? We're going to have some heated debates as to what is living a good life.
Right.
I would rather a lost soul who doesn't know Jesus Christ, who's trying to live a life of love and integrity and courage and commitment, than an individual who claims to know Jesus Christ and lives passively by the side.
Yeah.
Right. And now I use Christianity because it's most prevalent in America, but we could easily talk about Buddhism. We could talk about Judaism. We could talk about even Islam in many ways. That my point being, pick your values, pick your virtues, live a disciplined approach to those. I don't care what virtues you choose.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a more fulfilling life. And you're not going to be so worried about when the deathbed comes, right? Because you're going to know I lived my life intentionally. Yes, I got up every morning. I loved my family to the best of my ability. I fell short some days, but it was the best I could do. I loved my friends to the best of my ability. I loved myself to the best of my ability. So I can pass on.
That's a big one.
With some honor, right? With knowing that I have lived my life courageously. I dared to love. Congratulations. Now you're talking about kind of healing the masculine energy instead of just getting rid of it, abolishing it, transforming it, medicating it, whatever you want to do.
And I think I can't remember if we said this, but when we first started the OG accountability, the thought process was you can be masculine and still show emotion. And I think that's with the crap we have going on in this country, they're trying to kill masculinity.
Yeah, even just the concept, the broad overarching concept.
Absolutely. And it's we don't see much of it in Texas as it is a lot in the blue states.
Michigan, it was rampant.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I was watching the news. I didn't realize there's parts of Michigan now that are completely Muslim ran.
Yeah, Dearborn has been for a long time.
I did not know that.
And like I said, I've got no problem with the Muslim religion.
I don't either.
By any means.
Just don't kill me.
I did fight in that war, but I have a lot of Muslim friends who are terrific members of the community and really give back quite a bit. And I've got a lot of respect for any individual that takes their success and reinvests it into their immediate community. So nothing against the Muslim religion, but yes, there are well-known, even some training grounds for some more extreme acts of what would be homegrown terrorism have been found out there in Michigan.
That's scary.
So,
it's
very
scary.
Think about.
Yeah, and I do want to say this about Muslim men. I worked with a guy named Muhammad. It's the most common name in them. Yeah. So surprise, surprise. But I'm going to tell you something about this guy. He did not like me. I did not like him. But we respected each other because he respected me because he always liked to debate. Always wanted to debate Christianity against the Muslim faith. Always. And the reason he liked me is because he would start saying stuff about the Quran, and I would start quoting to him what he was telling me, and he'd look at me, and I'm like, I've read the Quran. And he's like, really? But I'm going to tell you something that impressed me about this guy. When you're talking about being purposeful and living a purpose life, didn't matter what was going on. There were certain hours of the day. If you want to know where Muhammad was, he was praying.
Yep.
Did not matter what was going on. He quit everything he was doing. And we knew you're not going to see him for a little bit. He's going to go pray. And we're not talking about once a day. We're not talking about twice a day. We're not talking about three. We're talking about like 4 times a day. And I'm like, what devotion? Now, people can be like, how dare you? They're, blah, 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 blah. You be that devoted.
To anything.
To anything.
Right.
To anything. These guys are so devoted, you could give them $1 billion and they'll go sleep in a cave to further what they think their belief is. Like they put their belief and their faith way ahead of themselves.
Now, is that a testament to their faith or their indoctrination system?
They do have a pretty fearful indoctrination system. I will tell you that.
Yeah. The Quran's full of it.
It is very full of it. My buddy Thad, he'll be out here tomorrow, and I want to get him on. But he's a pastor in Clear Lake. Love the guy, and I'm going to say this. I really want to say this, and I'm going to say it on air. When I say he's a pastor, he's a teacher. I can't stand when somebody, just me, calls somebody a pastor or a preacher. I don't ever want to be called that. I want to be a teacher. I don't want to get up and the Lord said in the first book, I don't want to play on your emotions, tag on your emotions. I want to give you fact. I want to give you the word of God and let you rightly decipher it. I may not ever go to your little kids' little league games. I may not show up to your house to have dinner. Guess what? That has nothing to do with you making heaven your home.
Right.
But in this country, we have made church something it was never supposed to be. And I'm not the guy that's going to sit here and come police you and what's in your refrigerator. And somebody just walked across there, didn't they?
Yeah, that's not mine.